In the quiet depths of the night, when the towering glass building of Halcyon Technologies stood bathed in the pale glow of streetlights, Samuel moved silently through its cavernous halls. As the night shift janitor, his role was simple on the surface: sweep, mop, empty trash bins, and ensure that the sprawling office complex remained spotless by morning. However, Samuel's presence was far from inconspicuous in his own mind. While others passed him by without a glance, he had cultivated an acute awareness of his surroundings, a habit born from years of navigating the labyrinthine corridors alone. The corporation was a titan in the tech world, known for its innovative software solutions and cutting-edge developments. Yet, beneath the polished veneer of success lay a persistent problem, a software glitch that crippled their flagship product. This glitch was no ordinary bug. It caused intermittent system crashes that disrupted service for hundreds of clients, leading to millions of dollars in lost revenue and eroding the confidence of investors. Despite the relentless efforts of the top engineers and software architects, the root cause of the problem remained elusive, cloaked in layers of complex code and hardware interactions. Samuel was far from the engineer's radar. To most, he was a background figure, a shadow that tidied the floors without ever crossing paths with the company's elite. But what set Samuel apart was an uncommon ability to notice details that others overlooked, a quiet curiosity that kept him alert during the long hours when the building was nearly empty. As he moved past rows of cubicles and glimmering conference rooms, his eyes would often linger on the server room, a fortress of blinking lights and humming machines that housed the digital heartbeat of the company. The server room was off-limits to most, sealed behind security doors and guarded by layers of access protocols. Yet, Samuel's duties occasionally brought him close, as he cleaned the adjacent corridors and maintenance closets. On these nightly rounds, he began to sense a pattern in the chaos. The crashes, he had heard, were random, but his observations told a different story. During certain hours, subtle flickers in the server room's indicator lights seemed to coincide with faint mechanical noises, a slight shudder in the cooling fans, a brief dip in power levels. It was intangible, almost imperceptible, but to Samuel, it hinted at an underlying disorder. Ever since his first week at Halcyon, Samuel had paid close attention to the staff's conversations, gleaning scraps of information about the glitch. The engineers spoke in hushed tones about memory leaks, buffer overflows, and race conditions, terms that floated over his head but piqued his interest nonetheless. He knew he lacked formal training, but his instinct told him that the problem might not lie solely in the software's code. Perhaps the hardware environment, the physical infrastructure that supported the software, was playing a role. Samuel's nights became a quiet investigation. After completing his cleaning rounds, he would pause by the server room's observation window, watching the rhythmic pulse of the machines. He started carrying a small notebook, scribbling down times and correlating them with what he heard and saw. The cooling vents cycling on and off, the temperature readings flickering on digital displays, the occasional spark of static electricity in the air. He noted patterns: a rise in temperature just before a crash, a subtle increase in fan speeds, a brief power fluctuation. These were details dismissed by the engineers as insignificant, but Samuel's keen eye saw them as clues. The building's night silence amplified every sound: the hum of the air conditioning, the distant clatter of cleaning carts, the faint tapping of keyboards left unattended. Samuel learned to listen carefully. He observed that the glitches often happened around 2:30 a.m., a time when the building was nearly deserted and the servers were still under heavy load from overnight batch processes. His notes grew more detailed, including sketches of the server racks and layout of cooling ducts, all pieced together from memory and occasional glimpses during maintenance checks. Despite his growing conviction, Samuel wrestled with doubt. He was a janitor, not a technician or engineer. Who would listen to a night cleaner's theories about a multi-million-dollar software issue? The hierarchy within Halcyon was rigid and unspoken. The engineers and managers occupied a different world from the cleaning staff, whose work was largely invisible. Samuel had learned to keep his observations to himself, fearing dismissal or ridicule. Still, the weight of the glitch on the company's fortunes bothered him. He knew that if the problem persisted, layoffs might follow, and the company's reputation could suffer irreparable damage. Though he worked in the shadows, Samuel felt a growing responsibility. If his observations could shed light on the issue, even in a small way, he was compelled to try. Night after night, he returned to the server room's perimeter, notebook in hand, refining his notes and timing the sequence of events with increasing precision. One evening, as he wiped down the glass of the observation window, Samuel noticed something new. A faint flicker in the power supply lights synchronized exactly with a subtle stuttering sound from the cooling system. The pattern was consistent, unlike the random crashes reported during the day. He realized that the cooling fans were cycling erratically, sometimes turning off for a split second before ramping back up. This erratic behavior could cause temperature spikes that, in turn, might trigger the software to crash or reboot. His mind raced with possibilities. Could the cooling system be failing intermittently? Was the software's instability a symptom rather than the cause? Samuel's heart pounded as he imagined how a tiny hardware fault could ripple through the complex software environment, causing catastrophic failures. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. It was a hypothesis that challenged the assumptions held by the engineers, a hypothesis born from the observations of a janitor. But with this realization came a new challenge: how to communicate it. Samuel knew that simply approaching the engineering team with his theories could lead to dismissal. He needed a way to present his findings carefully, backed by evidence, however modest. Over the next few nights, he focused on gathering more data, timing the cooling system cycles against the server logs he glimpsed on screens left unattended in empty offices. His notes grew into a tentative map of cause and effect, though incomplete and unsophisticated. Samuel was aware that his lack of technical jargon and formal methodology would be a barrier. Yet, he took solace in the fact that his observations were grounded in tangible phenomena: the flickering lights, the timing of the cooling fans, the temperature readings. This was more than guesswork. It was a collection of patterns waiting to be understood. As dawn approached and the first workers arrived for the morning shift, Samuel finished his rounds and retreated to the janitor's closet. There, beneath the harsh fluorescent lights, he carefully reviewed his notebook. Each page was a testament to his quiet determination, a chronicle of the nights spent listening, watching, and thinking. Though invisible to the bustling world around him, Samuel felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps, in this vast and complex machine of a company, his small observations could become the first thread in unraveling a costly mystery. For now, his role remained that of the unseen custodian, moving through the empty halls with broom and mop. But beneath the surface, a quiet mind was piecing together clues that no one else had noticed, a janitor's insights slowly sharpening into something more. The night was far from over, and Samuel's journey was just beginning. Each night after his shift, Samuel retreated to the dim corner of the janitor's closet, his small notebook open before him. The pages were filled with hastily scrawled notes, sketches of cooling vents, and timelines marking the faint flickers and hums he had observed in the server room. He was piecing together a puzzle that no one else seemed to see, and every detail mattered. The pattern was becoming clearer: the erratic cycling of the cooling fans, the subtle surge in temperature, the flickering power lights, all coinciding with the system crashes that had plagued Halcyon Technologies for months. Yet, despite the mounting evidence in his notebook and the growing conviction in his heart, Samuel was painfully aware of the invisible barrier his job title imposed. He was not an engineer, a technician, or even a member of the IT staff. He was, in the eyes of most, just a janitor, a faceless cog in the company's vast machinery. The thought weighed heavily on him, gnawing at his resolve. Who would listen to a night cleaner's theories about a multi-million-dollar software failure? Could he risk exposing his ideas and face dismissal or ridicule? Still, the problem was too pressing to ignore. The company's leadership was desperate for answers. Reports of the glitch flooded the internal communication channels. Management meetings buzzed with frustration. Engineers brainstormed without breakthrough, and the software team worked around the clock trying to patch what seemed like a never-ending cascade of failures. The stakes were high, and the atmosphere tense. One evening, as Samuel wiped down the gleaming floor outside the IT department's open plan office, he noticed a whiteboard cluttered with flowcharts and error codes, the engineer's frantic attempts to map the glitch's origins. Samuel's eyes scanned the diagrams, and although much was beyond his technical knowledge, he recognized familiar terms: thermal spike, system reboot, cooling failure. It was as though the engineers were circling the same idea he had stumbled upon, yet unable to connect the dots. The hardware environment was a suspect, but no one had confirmed it. Fueled by a mixture of hope and hesitation, Samuel made his first attempt to reach out. The next day, when the office was alive with activity, he approached a middle-aged engineer named Mark, who often stayed late and seemed less guarded than others. Samuel's voice was tentative as he shared his observations about the cooling fans and temperature spikes. He showed Mark his notebook, pointing to the timings and notes he had carefully compiled. Mark glanced at the pages with a polite but skeptical smile. "Interesting," he said, "but this isn't exactly how we diagnose software glitches. You might be noticing something, but it's probably a coincidence. The engineers have been running extensive diagnostics, and hardware has been ruled out." His tone was kind but dismissive, a subtle reminder of the invisible line between their worlds. Samuel nodded, swallowing the sting of rejection. He retreated quietly, his mind racing with doubts. Had he been foolish to speak up? His position made it nearly impossible to gain credibility. The company's culture was entrenched in hierarchy. Ideas were valued only when voiced by those with formal credentials. The thought was disheartening, and for a moment, Samuel considered shelving his notes and returning to his routine. But the glitch persisted, and Samuel's curiosity would not let him rest. Night after night, he refined his observations, timing the cooling cycles with greater precision, cross-referencing his notes with error reports glimpsed on unattended screens. He began to see patterns in the chaos, subtle inconsistencies in the cooling system's behavior that the engineers' software-focused diagnostics might have missed. His conviction grew stronger, fueled by the belief that the problem was not just software, but a complex interplay between hardware and code. Encouraged by this belief, Samuel tried again. This time, he approached a junior technician named Lisa, who he had seen working late in the server room. Lisa was younger, more approachable, and less bound by the rigid hierarchy that seemed to govern the older engineers. Samuel hesitated but explained his findings in simple terms, showing her the erratic cooling cycles and their possible link to the crashes. Lisa listened attentively, her brow furrowed in thought. "I've noticed some unusual temperature fluctuations too," she admitted. "But we've been told it's probably nothing. Still, your notes are detailed. Maybe there's something worth looking into." Her words sparked a flicker of hope in Samuel's heart. At least someone was willing to consider his perspective. Together, they spent the following nights observing the server room's behavior. Lisa used her access to pull system logs, correlating them with Samuel's timing notes. They discovered that the cooling fans occasionally powered down for brief intervals, causing temperature spikes that aligned closely with the system crashes. This erratic cooling behavior had been overlooked, dismissed as a minor hardware quirk rather than a trigger for the software failures. Their collaboration breathed new life into Samuel's efforts. No longer isolated, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. But the path ahead remained daunting. They needed to convince the engineering team and management to investigate the cooling system further, a task that would require careful presentation and undeniable evidence. Meanwhile, Samuel's attempts to share his ideas outside this small circle continued to meet resistance. At a departmental meeting, he cautiously presented his observations to a group of engineers, using simple language and his notebook sketches. The room responded with polite nods followed by skeptical murmurs. One senior engineer, clearly impatient, interrupted him. "Janitor, right? We appreciate your enthusiasm, but troubleshooting complex software isn't something you can solve with surface observations. Leave it to the professionals." The dismissal stung deeply. Samuel felt the weight of his job title more acutely than ever. His role was to clean floors, not to diagnose system failures. Yet, beneath the surface, the truth of his observations remained. The problem was real, and the cooling system was a likely culprit. His frustration deepened, but so did his resolve. He refused to let the limitations of his position define him or silence his insights. Over the following weeks, Samuel and Lisa worked quietly but persistently, documenting the erratic cooling cycles and their correlation with system crashes. They compiled logs, temperature readings, and fan cycle data, creating a body of evidence that was difficult to ignore. Samuel's nights became a balance of routine cleaning and covert investigation. He stayed late, lingering near the server room, sometimes risking reprimand to observe maintenance schedules and cooling system behavior. His notebook grew thicker, each page a testament to his determination to unravel the mystery that had eluded the company's brightest minds. The strain was not without cost. Samuel felt isolated, caught between two worlds, invisible to the engineers, and yet burdened with knowledge that could disrupt the status quo. He wrestled with self-doubt and the fear of failure, but the quiet affirmation from Lisa and the growing consistency of their findings kept him moving forward. In moments of solitude, Samuel reflected on the paradox of his journey. Here he was, a janitor with no formal training, navigating the intricate dance of machines and software that powered a tech giant. His observations, once dismissed as the ramblings of a night cleaner, were beginning to form a coherent narrative. The glitch was not random. It was a symptom of something deeper, something mechanical. As the nights wore on, Samuel prepared himself for the next step, sharing their evidence with those who held the power to act. But he knew the road ahead would be fraught with skepticism and resistance. The company's culture was slow to embrace voices from outside its technical elite. Yet, Samuel's conviction remained unshaken. If his notes and Lisa's support could open just one mind, it might be enough to turn the tide. For now, he remained in the shadows, a watchful guardian of the night's secrets, driven by the hope that his quiet persistence might one day break through the walls that separated him from the people who held the answers. The glitch was a puzzle, and Samuel was determined to see it solved, not as a janitor, but as an observer who refused to be invisible. Night after night, Samuel and Lisa delved deeper into the tangled web of the server room's mysteries. What began as tentative conversations and cautious observations blossomed into a genuine partnership. Lisa, with her technical training and access, brought a new dimension to Samuel's persistent curiosity. Together, they merged his meticulous notes with system logs and hardware diagnostics, forging a clearer picture of the elusive glitch. Lisa had always admired Samuel's attention to detail. While her colleagues often overlooked minor fluctuations in cooling patterns as inconsequential, Samuel's unwavering focus on these nuances was infectious. His unconventional perspective, unburdened by technical jargon, allowed him to notice connections that others missed. For her part, Lisa was eager to push beyond the boundaries of standard protocol, frustrated by the management's reluctance to consider hardware issues as the root cause. Their combined efforts unearthed a startling revelation. The cooling system's behavior was far from benign. The fans that regulated the server room's temperature were not cycling smoothly. Instead, they exhibited irregular pauses and surges. These erratic fluctuations led to brief but significant temperature spikes around critical server clusters, just moments before the system crashes recorded in the logs. It was a pattern that no software patch could fix. Armed with this insight, Lisa and Samuel began to map out the sequence of events. The servers, stressed by the abrupt heating, would enter fail-safe modes, triggering system reboots and causing the cascading errors that had plagued Halcyon for months. The glitch was not a simple bug in the code. It was a symptom of a failing cooling system, an overlooked mechanical fault masquerading as a software defect. Despite this breakthrough, they faced an uphill battle, convincing the broader IT department to take their findings seriously. Samuel's position as a janitor was a persistent obstacle. The company's culture was rigid, and ideas were often filtered through the lens of formal authority. Still, Lisa's presence lent credibility, and together they prepared to present their case. Their first joint meeting was informal, a quiet gathering in a cramped conference room with a few engineers and technicians. Samuel was nervous, clutching his notebook, while Lisa projected system logs and temperature charts on the screen. Samuel spoke plainly, describing the cooling fans' erratic cycles and their correlation with the server crashes. Lisa supplemented his observations with technical data, highlighting temperature spikes and hardware behavior. The room was initially quiet, punctuated by skeptical glances and whispered doubts. Some engineers exchanged skeptical looks, hesitant to accept a diagnosis so far removed from their software-centered investigations. One senior engineer, arms crossed, voiced the prevailing sentiment. "We've run extensive software tests. Hardware has been ruled out. Are we sure these temperature fluctuations aren't just noise?" Lisa responded calmly. The data shows consistent temperature spikes that align precisely with crash events. The cooling fans aren't operating within expected parameters. It's not noise, it's a pattern. Samuel added, I've observed the cooling fans cycling off briefly, and the timing matches the crashes. It's something I noticed during my nightly rounds. The room remained divided. Some were intrigued, others resistant. Yet, Lisa and Samuel's evidence was compelling. It was clear that further investigation was warranted. Over the following days, the IT leadership authorized controlled tests to monitor the cooling system more closely. Lisa coordinated with maintenance teams to inspect the fans and cooling ducts. They discovered worn-out components and faulty sensors that caused the fans to stall intermittently. Repairs and recalibrations were scheduled, followed by careful monitoring. Samuel and Lisa worked side by side during the tests, timing cooling cycles, recording temperatures, and correlating data with server logs. The atmosphere was tense but hopeful. On the first night after the repairs, the system ran smoothly without a single crash. The cooling fans operated consistently, maintaining stable temperatures throughout the server room. The results were undeniable. The glitch that had haunted Halcyon for months was significantly reduced, if not eliminated. The company's financial losses slowed, and the engineers began to breathe easier. Samuel's observations, once dismissed, had led to a tangible solution. In the aftermath, the atmosphere within the IT department began to shift subtly. Samuel, once an invisible figure on the night shift, found himself invited to informal discussions and briefings. His role as an observer was acknowledged, and Lisa became an advocate for his insights. Together, they exemplified how diverse perspectives could converge to solve complex problems. Yet, the journey was far from over. Samuel was acutely aware that his acceptance within the technical community was fragile, contingent on continued results and the support of allies like Lisa. He remained humble but resolute, committed to bridging the gap between his unique vantage point and the company's technical elite. As dawn broke over Halcyon Technologies, the glow of the city lights reflected off the polished surfaces of the building. Within its walls, a quiet transformation was underway. The collaboration between a janitor and a junior technician had challenged assumptions and opened new pathways of understanding. It was a testament to perseverance, curiosity, and the power of partnership, a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected voices hold the key to untangling the most complex mysteries. The conference room buzzed with a mix of skepticism and cautious curiosity as Lisa and Samuel prepared to present their findings to the IT department leadership. The room was filled with senior engineers, department heads, and a few members of management, all accustomed to hearing polished technical reports from their peers, not from a janitor with a notebook full of sketches and observations. Samuel's palms were sweaty as he clutched his notes, but Lisa's steady presence beside him offered a quiet reassurance. Lisa began the presentation, her voice clear and confident as she outlined the technical data linking the cooling system's erratic behavior to the persistent software crashes. She projected graphs showing temperature spikes, fan cycle irregularities, and server error logs, methodically connecting the dots that had eluded the company's best minds for months. The room's atmosphere shifted from skepticism to intrigue, eyes flicking between the screen and Samuel, who then stepped forward. Samuel spoke simply but with conviction, recounting the patterns he had observed during his nightly rounds. The subtle flickers in the cooling fans, the timing of power fluctuations, the correlations that no one else had noticed. His story was not one of technical jargon, but of quiet observation, patience, and persistence. Despite the initial surprise at a janitor's involvement, the room grew silent, absorbing the weight of his words. Questions followed, some probing, others doubtful, but Lisa and Samuel answered as best they could. The data was compelling, and the evidence too consistent to dismiss. After long debate, the leadership agreed to conduct controlled tests, adjusting the cooling system according to the duo's recommendations and closely monitoring the results. In the following days, Samuel found himself working alongside engineers and technicians in ways he had never imagined. His role remained unofficial, but his presence was welcomed rather than ignored. Lisa coordinated the repairs, overseeing the replacement of faulty fans and recalibration of temperature sensors. Samuel continued to document changes in cooling cycles and server stability, his notebook growing with new data. The night the system was tested under the new parameters, the building was unusually still. Samuel stood near the server room, watching the steady hum of machines and the consistent rotation of cooling fans. The temperature monitors held steady, without the erratic spikes that had been so familiar. Hours passed, and the dreaded system crashes failed to materialize. When the morning shift arrived, the engineering team greeted the day's reports with relief and quiet celebration. The software glitches had dropped dramatically, a testament to the success of the hardware adjustments. Samuel's observations had not only solved a costly problem, but also challenged the company's conventional approaches to troubleshooting. News of the breakthrough spread quickly through Halcyon Technologies. Samuel's contributions, once dismissed as irrelevant, were now acknowledged in meetings and internal communications. The culture began to shift subtly as managers and engineers recognized the value of diverse perspectives, especially those from unexpected places. Samuel was invited to share his experience in an all-hands meeting, standing before colleagues who had once overlooked him and receiving sincere applause. For Samuel, the recognition was both humbling and empowering. He had crossed invisible boundaries, proving that insight and determination could transcend job titles and hierarchies. The company responded by creating a new position, Process Observer, designed to harness the unique viewpoints of staff members from all levels. Samuel was offered the role, bridging the gap between operations and technical teams, a living reminder that valuable solutions can emerge from the margins. Lisa's support had been instrumental throughout the journey. Their partnership became a symbol within the company of collaboration and openness. Together, they continued to monitor systems, refine processes, and foster an environment where curiosity was encouraged and voices were heard regardless of rank. As Samuel settled into his new role, he reflected on the path that had brought him here, from the quiet janitor making nightly rounds to a recognized contributor in a high-tech corporation. His story inspired colleagues and management alike, sparking initiatives to engage employees across departments and levels in problem-solving and innovation. The changes at Halcyon Technologies extended beyond technical fixes. They nurtured a culture of inclusivity and respect, where ideas were valued based on merit, not position. Samuel's journey became a testament to the power of perseverance, the importance of listening, and the courage to speak up. In the glow of the city lights filtering through the office windows, Samuel knew his work was far from over. But with newfound purpose and the trust of his colleagues, he embraced the challenges ahead, ready to seek solutions, inspire change, and remind everyone that sometimes the key to innovation lies in the most unexpected places. The morning sunlight filtered softly through the towering windows of Halcyon Technologies, casting long shadows across the gleaming floors of the office complex. Samuel, now no longer just the janitor but the company's newly appointed process observer, stood quietly in the midst of a bustling meeting. The room was filled with engineers, managers, and staff from various departments, all gathered to hear his story, a narrative that had become a symbol of change within the company. Just months earlier, Samuel had been an invisible presence, his work overlooked, his voice unheard. But today he stood at the center of attention, invited to share the journey that had transformed not only a costly software glitch, but the very culture of Halcyon. His voice was steady as he recounted the nights spent observing cooling fans flickering erratically, the painstaking notes he had kept, and the initial dismissals he faced when attempting to raise concerns. He spoke of persistence, the quiet determination to see beyond the limitations imposed by his job title, and the unexpected alliance with Lisa, the junior technician who had believed in his insights. The room listened intently, some nodding in recognition, others reflecting on their own assumptions. Samuel's story was more than a technical case study. It was a testament to the power of diverse perspectives and the courage to speak up, regardless of rank. It underscored how valuable insights often come from the most unexpected places, challenging the company's rigid hierarchies and opening doors to innovation. The applause that followed was sincere and warm, a stark contrast to the indifference he had once known. Samuel smiled, feeling the weight of recognition but also the responsibility it carried. The company had not only solved a million-dollar problem, but had begun to foster a more inclusive environment where every voice mattered. In the weeks that followed, Samuel's role as a process observer flourished. He became a bridge between the operational staff and technical teams, translating observations from the factory floors and maintenance areas into actionable insights. His unique vantage point allowed him to spot patterns and potential issues that might otherwise go unnoticed. The company embraced this new approach, encouraging employees across all levels to share observations and ideas. Workshops and forums were established to facilitate collaboration, breaking down silos and fostering a culture of openness. Samuel often spoke at these events, inspiring others to trust their instincts and contribute to the collective success. His journey also prompted leadership to reconsider how talent and insight were recognized and nurtured. Formal programs were introduced to identify and develop employees whose skills might lie outside traditional job descriptions, but whose contributions could be invaluable. For Samuel, the transformation was deeply personal. He no longer felt confined by his job title or invisible in the corporate machinery. Instead, he had become a catalyst for change, proving that curiosity, attention to detail, and perseverance could overcome barriers and lead to meaningful impact. Outside the office, colleagues who once barely acknowledged his presence now greeted him with respect and camaraderie. Lisa remained a close ally, their partnership a testament to the power of collaboration across roles and backgrounds. As the months turned into years, Samuel's story became part of Halcyon's corporate lore, a reminder that innovation thrives when organizations listen beyond the usual voices. His experience inspired other companies to reevaluate their cultures, embracing diversity of thought and the courage to question assumptions. Samuel continued his work with quiet dedication, ever vigilant during his nightly rounds, ever curious about the machinery and systems around him. The janitor who had once kept to the shadows was now a recognized contributor, a symbol of possibility. In the stillness of the night, as he moved through the halls he had come to know so intimately, Samuel smiled to himself. The journey had not been easy, but it had been worth every step. He had helped reshape a company and, in doing so, had reshaped his own destiny. His story was a beacon, a testament to the fact that sometimes the most profound insights come from those who dare to observe deeply, question boldly, and persist relentlessly. And for Samuel, that was just the beginning.